Hi, this is my audience. Yay, thank you all so much. Okay.
It's all robots.
Yep, it's true. Hi, I'm here to talk today about why I think that all middle and high schools in the United States should require sexual education classes for adolescent students, comprehensive sexual education classes. And as a lot of you may know, we typically see a lot of what's known as abstinence-only sexual education classes in the United States. Now, I was really lucky because while my high school did offer abstinence-only education classes, my mother is a nurse, so I got a lot of my sexual education at home in terms of contraceptives and teen pregnancy and all of that important stuff. But not everybody has that privilege, so that's why I think it's really important that we make this information public. So, according to a nonprofit organization called Adolescents for Youth in Washington, D.C., who work to eliminate STDs and specifically the spread of AIDS, they say that adolescents have a fundamental human right to accurate and comprehensive sexual health education. And this is something that I really believe and agree with. So, moving forward, the history of sexual education first began in the United States in the late 1980s. People were really concerned with rising teen pregnancies throughout the 1960s, and as you're probably familiar with, in the 1980s, we saw the AIDS epidemic become rampant. And so that's when sexual education became common. However, in the late 1990s, as a result of welfare reform, abstinence-only sexual education became the most common thing and was actually accepted in 49 out of 50 states. And this information comes from the U.S. National Library of Medicine, FYI.
Who opted out?
I'm sorry?
Who was the 50th state?
Out?
I don't know. That's a good question.
And what a goofy idea.
Yes.
Anyway, just saying.
Probably
It's
Texas.
a shaker state.
Yes.
Texas,
Texas.
right? Michigan.
So, I'm terribly sorry to talk over you, but I do have a time limit on this,
Oh,
and I
sorry.
will lose points. I'm sorry. I'm usually more fun than this. So, according to National Public Radio, abstinence-only education is really considered medically unethical because they generally withhold a lot of information related to STD prevention and contraceptives and teenage pregnancy and overstate the risk of contraceptive failure and just encourage teenagers not to have sex. Unfortunately, studies show that this type of education does actually not lead to delaying of sexual activity or lower numbers of sexual partners or any of those things that it aims to do.
No way.
Right. What it does actually do, unfortunately, is as a result of most abstinence-only programs being related to a religious space, they often reinforce strict gender stereotypes and can result in higher rates of bullying and even domestic violence, which is obviously something that we want to stay away from. And again, that was from NPR. So, according to the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, comprehensive sexual education actually lowers teen pregnancy by 50% more than abstinence-only education, right? So, I get it. Those of you with teenagers probably don't want to teach your 16-year-old kid how to use one of these. But if you don't, you might have to teach your teenage kid what to do with one of these. So we don't want that. Thank you. So, now, when we look at comprehensive sex education, it actually accomplishes a lot of the things that abstinence-only education aims to do. We see lower rates of teen pregnancy and therefore lower rates of abortion. We also see lower rates of STDs and STIs. And this is from Adolescents for Youth, the aforementioned nonprofit in Washington, D.C. And Planned Parenthood actually offers sexual education classes, and they're very dedicated to including information about consent, sexual orientation, the LGBT community, and inclusivity, and emotional well-being. So not only that physical side of sexuality, but the emotional and mental side as well, which adolescents really miss out on in that abstinence-only education and is really important. I mean, we all remember what it was like to be a teenager and curious about this stuff, right? Like, yeah, it's a big deal.
Not me.
So,
with you.
So one question that you might have is, if comprehensive sexual education seems so much more successful than abstinence-only education, why do we see so much more abstinence-only education in the United States? The answer to that is pretty simple, but it's also not easy. The thing is, we have a really deep-seated societal taboo around sexuality. And so many people are really reluctant to make these kind of changes. So in terms of what you can do, if you have a teenage child or a niece or nephew or somebody in your life that you care about, often when classes or when high schools do offer sexual education classes, they require parent or guardian consent forms. So if you receive one of those permission forms, like, please give the adolescent your consent, give them access to this information. Some of these classes and the information available there could save their lives. And as we talked about before, I believe it's really a fundamental human right that adolescents have access to this information. Also remember that you can give adolescents your values and still allow them to have access to this information. By giving them this access, you're not telling them that you want them to go out and have sex and be unsafe. You're giving them the tools that they need to stay safe, and you can also give them your values at home. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you see the ways that you can make a positive change in changing the societal attitude around this issue. And hopefully we can see more improvement in the future for our teens and adolescents. Thanks so much.